Hello, everyone, and welcome to our IEEE Young Professionals webinar. Today's webinar is quite exciting. It's on lessons learned, stuff they don't teach you in engineering school. And it's actually a webinar with one of our societies, the EMC Society. And our speaker today is Mike Violette. I'm gonna just some introduction pointers. I'm Matthew Carrios, the webinar specialist for the MGA Young Professionals Board. I'm also the vice chair in communications and marketing, and we're going to be hosting monthly webinars in 2016. So stay tuned. During the webinar, please, if you have any questions, type them in the space provided below. I'll be relaying those questions back to Mike at the end of the webinar. So we are hosting free meetup events of high impact global conferences around the world. So at CES, Web Summit, South by Southwest, and we're trying to hit each region of IEEE with a free IEEE event, typically a mixer or a networking event at these high impact conferences. So please stay tuned for that in 2016. Please connect with us online. I'll be talking more about this at the end of the webinar. And please, if you haven't joined us on our Collaboratech community, please join there, because that is where we're going to be relaying all worldwide young professionals events in the months to come. So just a quick introduction, Mike Violette, he's the CEO of Washington Laboratories, founder director of the American Certification Body. It's quite an exciting webinar that I'm having the pleasure to host, and it's on what they don't teach you in engineering school: money, culture, how to interact with people, and I'm really looking forward to it. So Mike, without any further delay, please go ahead and take it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I'm excited and pleased to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the young professionals. They have a very active chapter within the EMC Society, and we're rolling out at a lot of the events where we get great participation from the younger demographic. So this is me about 25 years ago and 20 pounds ago with my dad, and a little bit more hair than I'm carrying around today. I've worked with my father until his death in 2008, and one of the early cool projects that we had in the 80s was doing lightning protection analysis of the Statue of Liberty. Maybe a number of the YPs weren't around then, but the statue had extensive restoration, 1985-86, and we had a contract to do an analysis of all the lightning strikes that had hit the statue over the last 100 plus years since its erection in New York Harbor. So we got the chance to don hard hats and crawl around on the scaffold. We got pictures up near the nose of the lady, and it was really quite a fascinating adventure. It was also a great adventure to a little bit of the culture of New York City and the hard hats and the iron workers there that were all assembled an international team to reconstruct the Lady Liberty. But today, what I do is I run a few small businesses. We're in the testing electronics area, and our gross sales are about $6 million a year. My employee base in the US and abroad is 40 employees total. About half of those are technical people, the other one's administrative and customer service, that kind of thing. So here in Maryland, we have 18 people in Gaithersburg and Frederick. And abroad, we have a team in China, Taiwan, and the European Union, in the Netherlands and Sweden, and in 4 cities in China. So our core competency is compliance testing and engineering. I've been a lifelong EMC Society member, so a lot of the technical activities revolve around EMC, which includes a lot of different disciplines. I haven't touched a solder iron for about 10 years or so, and that was an intentional thing because I felt my role really was to do business development for our group. So it's been an exciting couple of the last 10 years, ever since I started getting heavily engaged in China, as a matter of fact. But my first job was slinging hamburgers and chopping pork at a small family-owned restaurant in McLean, Virginia. One of the perks was there you could eat all you wanted, which really helped my mom and dad because we had 7 kids in our family. In fact, 6 out of 7 of them eventually worked at this barbecue place. That was ended about 1978, 79. That was the last time I worked directly for another person or company other than my father. Flash forward 30 years, and my son joined Three Pigs, and ultimately he graduated from a mechanical engineering school this last year and is now on our staff at Washington Laboratory. So you could say that the family business sort of runs in our blood. After high school, I went to Virginia Tech, and we were the last class that had to carry around punch cards for doing Fortran programming. And it was quite a peril there to make sure that your cards, you didn't drop them on the sidewalk, because reassembling them to get them in the right order was quite a trick, and time on the computer was quite limited. During that time, I studied communication theory and microwave electronics, and after cramming 4 years of school into 5, I eventually graduated with a BS degree out of Virginia Tech. Took away a few lessons from college. The first one is don't sign up for 8 a.m. classes in Blacksburg during the winter if you can help it. Also, we learned the library is a great place to study or take a nap. Another critical survival skill is to make sure you had gas and other supplies for any round trip or any road trip you might be taking. And don't let your sketchy doormate borrow your coveted TI-58. You might not see it in the same condition again. These are all lessons learned, and some of the most important ones, which I've taken into my adulthood, is making sure you're at Mr. Fu's Thursday night for the half-off pitchers. Well, what have I learned since college? Well, something, I hope. But I'm always amazed at how little I know, how much there is to know. All you have to do is look at a bookcase anywhere and see the volumes of information that are out there that we really don't have a clue on the whole idea of the universe and how it works. But I have learned a little bit. And I learned a lot of this from my father. He's my biggest influence, technically and morally. As I mentioned, he passed away a number of years ago, but he would always have a smile, and he would always say, "Don't sweat the small stuff," which is something I carry in my hip pocket every day. He was, as I say, a quintessential engineer. He loved Maxwell's equations. He loved solving them. He would spend hours with a long legal form just working out Green's theorems. I never approached that mastery. As I mentioned before, as I've said in some intro, I'm a recovering engineer. I'm more oriented towards the business type of development. But I did follow him into business, which he started in 1979 after a distinguished career in the Air Force. And as he would say, I must do it before I'm too sick, lame, or lazy. So he started his business, and I joined him a few years after. But Dad's early life was shaped by his small town upbringing in Winslow, Maine, which is a mill town in southern Maine. And my grandfather, his father, Harvey Violette, told him many times, you have to get out of the woods and see what is out there. And he did. So he left Winslow, Maine at the age of 18 and never returned to live there, living around the United States and stationed overseas. He spent a year in Vietnam flying airplanes between Da Nang and Cam Ranh Bay. He earned 2 distinguished flying crosses and was involved during the Tet Offensive when the Marines were pinned down at Khe Sanh in the middle of the country. He had 998 takeoff and landings in Vietnam, which was quite a few. Earned a PhD, an MBA, and a lifelong learner. So joining him, I got to be introduced to electromagnetic compatibility engineering, which got me out of the woods in a way. And because this discipline covers so many different varieties of practicing from aerospace to consumer electronics, industrial controls, energy, automotive, transportation, you name it, you get a really wide variety of exposure to different types of things. So I was fortunate to have some business travel, spent some time in Turkey and spent some time in the Far East, get around the world. Some of these are discretionary trips because I just think that the world serves up such fascinating life lessons and the opportunity to interact with people in a direct way, particularly in business travel. But I think young professionals, they already get this lesson. They get around. Right now we're doing a promotion encouraging young professionals to get out and engage with the society, IEEE, the EMC Society, and IEEE in general. And I'm just so pleased to see the diversity and the demographics of this group that's called the Young Professionals. So I think I'm excited to see how their careers unwind and improve the world. So I love this quote from Mark Twain: "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness." And part of the management style that I've tried to develop is based on trying to understand people. And the second part, broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all at one's lifetime. And I firmly believe that. And I think the more you get to explore the world, you find out how much everybody is pretty much the same. So part of the lessons is getting out of the woods is appreciating and enjoying some different cultural aspects, things that might be somewhat odd to you from maybe where you're growing up. How do you understand the guy that takes his commute in this truck in India? Or in Nepal, carrying up these construction materials, several hundred kilograms on their backs for hours and hours, days at a time. Or these young kids who chased us around in Diyarbakir. We were definitely stood out from the crowd. My colleague was wearing cowboy boots, a t-shirt and jeans, so they were running after him, yelling, "Yankee, Yankee." Or how do you understand these people selling trinkets in Pakistan, where there's hardly any customers, but they're there day after day? And as I mentioned, I did learn a few things in college, and one of them was to hoist a beer or two and managed to walk away from the table. So I learned a little bit about the Gambay culture in Asia, which is tremendous fun. So for me, the world was pretty small. I was a small white kid in suburban America, wanted to play electric guitar for a living. My dad said, "You might want to have something to fall back on." And one of my first introductions to the wide world was my lab partner, Hien. And he and I were the same age. And I met him during college at Virginia Tech, and he told me about his life. So when he was 14, 15, and same age as me, and I was playing guitar and trying to chase down girls, he was trying to escape to freedom. And he said one time he spent 30 days in a cell where he had opportunities either to stand up or kneel. So crowded was the cell. But he persevered, and he made it to America. And he really represents that type of immigrant class that's a real working class hero. As my father mentioned to me many times when he was standing on the flight line next to his airplane, he'd look over across the tarmac and see a farmer plowing with a water buffalo. And he'd say often, "Our early Americans from 1776 have more in common than we do." So learning about Vietnam was a important part of the development of my appreciation for outside cultures and outside experiences. On one of the trips to Saigon, I met these four guys, Tien, Tuan, Ka, and Nguyen. And I had some time to kill in my hotel, and I walked outside, and Tien on the left side there had a big beaming smile, and he's waving me down, getting my attention. And he said, "I've been waiting for you my whole life." Well, he was trying to hustle me to have him take me on a tour of Saigon. So I thought that was a great intro. And so I went with him and learned about his life. And he was about the same age as me at that time too, about 45. And he told me how he was conscripted out of bed by the South Vietnamese army and thrown into the Cambodian jungles. And several of his friends and relatives died during those awful, wasteful fights. So he survived, and he raised a child, and his wife is a nurse. And at that time, they make about $90 a month, doing whatever they can, nursing, or for him, hustling tourists and giving tours of Saigon. Tuan was a different story. He's interesting. He's, again, about my age, and he escaped early in the 1970s and went to Australia and opened up Vietnamese restaurants. And he is a success story overseas in Australia. He returned back to Saigon when things started opening up, when the United States started opening things up in the 80s, and runs a string of successful restaurants. So he's an example of someone that escaped and came back and found a new life back in the old country. Ka was a different story. His family was allied with the U.S. forces in the South, and so they were quite disenfranchised, to say the least. And his family lost everything, and they were pushed out to the Mekong River Delta, where they were forced to just survive on very little. So he was on the wrong side of the losing end. Then Nguyen, or Nick on the right, was offspring of Viet Cong. So the victors obviously took the spoils, and he's led a very interesting life studying in Cambridge in England. But he too is a entrepreneur and is friends with Tuan, the guy the second from the left. So quite a very different set of circumstances and very interesting different arcs, but a strong imprint on me in U.S.-Vietnam legacy. So lesson one, get out of the woods. So my favorite travel is business travel. Leisure travel is fine, but you never get to get under the skin of the culture of the people, or learn of their family. So I spend a fair amount of time on travel, and I'm amazed at all the different perspectives that I can learn from those engagements. So I encourage you, if your company wants you to travel, is take that road job and take a few extra days on either end to explore the culture and get to know some of the people in those foreign places. So get out of your comfort zone. Most of the world is safe. I think sometimes the media portrays things in a little too negative a way, but I've never felt like there's been any danger in the various places that I've been. So this really becomes a management lesson from lesson one, get out of the woods. And my wife reminds me this, that when you meet someone for the first time, it's not what you tell them that they will remember, it's how you make them feel that they will remember. And I think that's a strong, important management lesson, because are you going to motivate or demotivate someone to engage with you? And a corollary A to lesson one is making more cultural connections, speaking some language, trying to pick up a few words. Even the smallest attempts are often met with joy in your counterparts, and they'll encourage you and even have some fun at your expense. Trying to learn Chinese, and during one of my visits over to China, I was walking with some my colleagues and speaking my lousy Chinese, and a couple of ladies behind me were laughing. So I asked them, why are you laughing? And she said, well, she says that you speak Chinese with a Japanese accent. So at least she recognized the language, but I'm still working on my accent. And as my mother likes often to quote, learn a new language and get a new soul, a Czech proverb, quoted by my mom, picture there. Corollary B to lesson one is try some new food. There's some very interesting things on the menu. You can see I'm quite an Asiaphile, and I love looking at the translations of different foods, and my colleagues over there always know I'm going to take out my phone and start snap some pictures of the City Wufu volume and the refreshing autumn ears, or the Shandong history of roast chicken. Or I love this one, the Slightly Twitter box. If your Twitter account needs something new, you can borrow that picture. Or the pocket elbow, delicious, by the way, I have tried that. And what black pepper beef goes best with fresh bacteria, but the one you can get in Beijing. So that's lesson one, is to embrace different cultural activities. I think it can be very refreshing, engaging, and productive for taking those lessons into how you approach maybe your workplace, or if you're a manager, how you can be sensitive and appreciate the struggles that other people may be going through. Lesson two is about crying. Now, we weren't taught in university that crying existed in engineering, but yes, it does. And I'll tell a little story about Matt and the fearsome ferrite. When I started Washington Labs back in the early 90s, I was pretty much a newbie in terms of management and taking customer service and how to react with people. Back during those times, the FCC scared the hell out of computer companies by requiring 100% sample testing of all computer models. So this was early in the EMC days, and it was quite a draconian sort of measure. So the FCC had a lot of influence there. Well, in order to make things pass, sometimes you have to modify equipment, and this is expensive. And I remember one time on the phone with poor Matt. He was a little hapless, and I told him that he had to put another ferrite on the computer, and he started weeping a little bit, and he said, Marty, his boss, Marty is going to kill me. And I really didn't know how to react to that, except, tell him that the ferrite was needed, and we got to move on. So sometimes there's crying, and sometimes we have to be a little bit forgiving of that, or understanding of that, because the pressure Matt was under. Because I had to interact with Marty, and he was pretty much a force of nature. So, lesson 2, how to deal with crying engineers. Well, I always would bounce things off of my father, Dr. Violette, and my father-in-law, Dr. Seafood, PhD economics. Also a similar story, coming out of a small town in Wisconsin, left at 18 and never returned, but managed to get a Fulbright scholarship and do some amazing economic work and achieve a PhD as well. Or you can ask a general who says, a sense of humor is part of the art of leadership, of getting along with people, of getting things done. Eisenhower famously said this. So they encourage me to try to use humor whenever things got to be a little bit difficult, and I have used that when I can and when it's appropriate. It always has to be in a positive way. And to use humor in conflict management. This is another kind of crying in engineering, and I've had employees cry in my office, and you have to try to make sure they feel better and get to the root of the problem. And one of the stories I like to tell to break the ice is a little bit about Shlomo and Vic. So Shlomo was an Orthodox New York computer manufacturer, maker, and he was strong, and he was a little bit pushy. And he met Vic on the phone, and Victor was my safety engineer. And I remember sitting in my office, again, back in those early days, and Victor was yelling at Shlomo, "No, Shlomo, we can't do that. We cannot." And he slammed the phone down. And I just sat there for a few minutes not knowing what to do. Well, turns out about 20 minutes later, Shlomo called me up, and he said, your guy Vic? I said, yeah. He said, he's good people. He understands us. So I think one of the lessons that I take away from this is incorporate some of these stories and grow your own style. So over the years, one of the things that I've tried to come up with is a certain style, and it had fits and starts, and I had many failures and a few successes, I guess. And my first management style, and I didn't have any tools for this because they didn't teach this to me in engineering school, was to govern by intolerables. So I'm a pretty laid back guy. So I decided to say, I'm going to tolerate a lot, but there's some things I'm not going to tolerate. And that's where I draw the line. And it all has to deal with respect to people. So once you start tolerating disrespect around a workplace, then things go to hell. But underpinning all that is if you mandate respect for colleagues, customers, vendors, the whole triad of people in your life, then you can get along. But this is not always so stable. So I've looked under my Mike Violette Management 2.0 and to try out for a stable solution, something that's a little bit more positive. So I looked to a triangle, which is ultimately undeformable because it's very stable. So when I look at stressful situations and conflict between two employees, or between a management person and a subordinate, or between a vendor and us, or between us and a customer, I try to look at these strategies that can build a stable situation. So here we have Calvin and Susie, and they're obviously at a point of disagreement. And when it gets to this point, I like to use the concept of 3 Gs. First, gather people together and gather the facts. Don't let the conflict simmer too long, because it's just going to get worse. Because if they cannot make a connection to resolve it themselves, ultimately it just gets worse and worse. The second G is to gain trust, and even to feel like there's love in the room. And I think this is very important as a manager, to try to show your employees, your staff, your teammates, that you do have an abiding sense of love, and you have an abiding sense of wanting them to succeed. That underpins all of our relationships that we try to develop. So the stable parts of the triangle is, any resolution has to be right for Susie, it has to be right for Calvin, and it has to be right for the company. So if one of those three things is not going to work, then you have to dissolve the relationship, basically. But you can see it becomes a stable situation, and if you can get then buy-in and commitment for whatever that resolution is going to be, and you must get it verbally, you must get it with eye contact, then I think you can have a successful result. And ultimately, if you use a little humor, your mouse ears, it often helps pave the, sugar it up a little bit. So the ultimate outcome is getting everybody back to work on the same project and pulling in the same direction, and maybe even pulling your pants up every once in a while. So the second source of tears in engineering is when you have a performance conflict. This is usually when you have an underperforming employee, or someone that has maybe a difficult personal situation they're dealing with, any manner of things that you may find in a workplace. So again, you want to build a stable solution. You can't push the can down the road for too long. And here I borrow from my set of intolerables. If you have a employee that's not performing well, it's ultimately going to affect your team. And you have to separate that situation out so that your team doesn't start to degrade in either in morale or in performance. And if you allow this situation to fester for too long, you ultimately will lose good people, because you're not dealing with a underperforming person. So you have to look at the impact of performance on your customers, your company, and your whole team. So again, pulling out the 3 Gs, you gather people together, people and facts, try to find out everything you can. You have to gain people's trust if you can. Sometimes you may have an employee situation where trust is just broken, and that's unfortunate. That means it went on too long. And ultimately get buy-in. So is the solution right for the employee? Is the job right? Is the working environment right? Is the situation either commuting or something else that's outside your control? Is that right? Can you fix that enough without compromising the rest of the team's participation? So it must be right for the team, and ultimately must be right for the company. So obviously there's 2 outcomes here. Either you resolve the situation and you move on and you have a happy employee, or that employee moves on. But as I said before, you can't wait too long to act, because those taillights might be driven by someone that you want to keep on the team, not the person that you're trying to rectify the situation. There is a corollary to lesson 2, and in a small company, having run this for a number of years, we've lost a few people over the years, and tragically, and at I think too young an age. So sometimes crying is okay in engineering. My last little lesson that was hard fought and hard won by me involves finance. In our engineering curriculum, we didn't take too many finance or business courses, and that's probably because I wasn't aware that I would have had to ultimately use them, because I was an engineer. I was going to deal with wires and transistors and antennas, but felt that after some years, I wish I had a little bit more underpinning about this. So lessons 1 and 2 dealt with the people aspects of our engineering careers. Lesson 3 is about money, and a very, very short overview of the things that I wish I had known 25 years ago. So did have one class in engineering undergrad course of studies. It was an engineering economics class, which dealt into great detail about models of depreciation of equipment, but had nothing to do with the actual financial impact of what you should learn if you're running a small business, or you're involved with any business for that matter. So this is a short little Finance 101. So The profit and loss statement is the company health meter. It's the company dashboard, if you will, and it tells everything about the company if it's up to date and it's timely and it's accurate. So what is this thing? It's the key dashboard. It basically what is coming in and what is going out, and more importantly, how is it going out? Is it being spent in the proper ways? And if you look at it over time, what are the trends? What are some of the dangers you might be facing? What are some of the seasonality of the business that you might expect? What are the potential threats to certain sectors that you might rely on for your income? So when I look at a P&L, and this is just kind of a generic one, the first thing I look at is the current year bottom line. Did we make money? Are we in the black? Yes, that bottom line is important, because without the bottom line, you can't have the cash to do other things. The second place my eyes go to is the top line. How much money did we make in that period, whether it be quarterly or yearly or whatever, however you want to look at it. And you can go as granular as month to month if you want to, and you should probably. The second place I look is how did we do compared to the previous period, whether the previous month, the previous year, the previous quarter, however you want. And QuickBooks and other financial accounting softwares can slice and dice this many different ways. And finally, I look on the income side of things. How much money did we make or lose compared to the period last year? On the expense side, usually I look at what our cost of goods sold are and what our gross profit's going to be on a year-by-year comparison basis. Then I might dig into some of the more aspects of the expenses. And the other thing that's important on the P&L is to look at the percentage of gross income on here. Now this percentage column shows the percent change year on year. However, I like to break it out to look at the percentage of income for that particular line item, because if it's a small percent of income, maybe I don't care a lot. Maybe it's changed a lot relative, but maybe it's a small income or outgo that I don't really care about. So I usually have my P&Ls have a percentage of the gross income there. And the other piece of financial tool that I wish I had more grounding on 30 years ago was a balance sheet. And a balance sheet basically says, what are your assets? What are your cash? What do people owe you in terms of accounts receivable, other types of things? This is a very simple balance sheet. What do you owe other people? And basically, how much is the company worth? How much is the equity that the owners might have? So this one, the balance sheet usually is not as dynamic as the P&L, but it should be checked on a very regular basis. So Matt, this is my summary slide. So several lessons. The lessons that I learned in college worked while I was in college. I did pretty well with all those things, but the lessons I learned since then took a long while to learn, and sometimes came at a high price, either failure or time spent or wasted energy, wasted efforts. But they were lessons that they're hard learned. And I think the most important lesson is those lessons 1 and 2, which is about people, because this is probably the most richest lesson of all. And if you can get those right, then the financial side of your well-being should be taken care of. So now I guess I'll invite any questions that may have come up or any comments.
Okay,
Michael, thanks for that.
For jobs that require travel, or do you maybe just if it comes your way, then just graciously accept it.
Could you repeat? You broke up a little bit there, Matt. Sorry.
So just going back on your jobs for travel, would you recommend young professionals actively seek positions that require travel, or would you still suggest stay with the company in the U opportunity?
Well, I guess it depends on the temperament. I think that one of the life-altering experience I've had has been the amount of travel that I've gotten to do. So that's shaped my perspective on management and also on running my company. So to me, it's been a positive. But some people may not, feel the same thing. They may find engagement in a different way. So I think, again, you have to kind of evolve your own style and take your own experiences and shape how you view and treat the world in that way. We're having some technical issues, I think, Matt. I think our host has lost some audio connectivity. Well, I'll just say thank you, Matt. I think you must have some connection problems, so I'm going to go ahead and log off here. If anybody has any comments, they can send me an email, mikeve@wll.com. Thank you for listening.